Hello everyone, and welcome to my Ret Paladin PvP starter guide. I've been making a lot of these, getting you ready for the new season, which starts this Tuesday, September 10th. Holy cow, very exciting. But we also got wind of some new information here. The WoW 20th anniversary patch notes are on Wowhead, and they're already coming with a ton of hero talent reworks, class and spec reworks. I mean, that's crazy. But you're not going to just do nothing, right? Until November comes around, which is when those generally come out, right? So I'm going to give you the information you need to compete in PvP right now, and then when those changes come out into the game, I will update the videos accordingly with all the new crazy stuff, so you can get used to it now and then get it updated in November. Okay, so now you know the plan for all my guides. Very exciting. Let's dive into it with Ret Paladin. Okay, so talent trees we start out with, and yes, I still have the class fantasy name. Silly, very silly, but it's fun. Sungazer and Indignation. So you can ask me questions or comments about these builds, and I'll know exactly which ones you're talking about. Herald of the Sun, Sungazer. It's got dot damage, radiant damage, fire. It's very, very cool, very flavorful. We've got a build coming for both sets of hero talents because they made hero talents very strong this time around. They didn't want to make a repeat of Shadowlands, which I almost gag when I think of. So yeah, very, very good sets of hero talents here. I think they're super viable, both of them. Let's talk about it. Okay. Top of the tree. Always pretty much locked in, right? It either gets you to the bottom of the tree or its core rotational abilities or both, and this is no exception, of course. We've got Expurgation, which is your big dot that comes from Blade of Justice, which you get 2 charges of, so you can do a ton of damage, holy power generation, and dot application. Then you get a judgment buff, which also is a slow, and a movement speed increase, and you don't want to get kited as a melee, so of course this is pretty powerful, and Ret Paladin doesn't have an abundance of slows anyway, so you might as well have that. This choice node is very, very close to irrelevant. I mean, Crusader Strike is now passive. It is just baked into your auto attacks from a talent that we'll talk about in a second. So you can either do Judgment or Blade of Justice, but you already have 2 charges of both, and they both come up pretty often. So I went with Judgment because it's got a lot of modifiers in the tree, and more Judgments, more damage. It's pretty nice. But really, I don't think this matters too much. Final Verdict is really nice. It adds a lot of damage to your Templar's Verdict, which is also going to have an increased range from Jurisdiction, which is fantastic, and you absolutely need this because what are you trying to do to a melee? You're trying to kite them, but with all of these range modifiers that Ret gets, it's very difficult to kite a Ret, so it's hard to peel its damage. Very good. Then you have that 2 charges I was talking about with Judgment, and then you have some mods, some Crusader Strike, some auto attack mods are in the tree. The other build uses both of these and both of these, spoiler. But this one I went with more of the pad damage from the dots, especially with the Herald of the Sun hero talent synergy. But you still run Crusading Strikes, which allows you to auto attack Crusader Strikes, which generate holy power from your autos, so you don't actually have to rotate in Crusader Strikes and have wasted globals, so you can press your more impactful globals. So everybody runs this all the time. Then we're rocking Crusade, which makes you juices up your wings, where the more holy power you spend, and believe me, you have a ton of holy power to generate, so you'll be spending a lot, gives you damage and haste stacking, which is really important because then you can go into Mastery and Verse and get as much of that as possible, and then get all the haste for your globals from Crusade. So it effectively gives you a secondary stat for free during your most important window, which is your burst window during Wings. Okay, and then you can extend it a little bit with Divine Wrath. So this is all fantastic. Okay, Wake of Ashes is a major cooldown, so we don't need to talk about that much. Let's go down this line. Here, like I said, even more Blade of Justice because you can reset the cooldown. It's either going to be reset this way or that way, and I did it with auto attacks because, you know, just passively, very easy to get. And then you can also get even more from critical strikes. You're not going to crit much, but it doesn't really matter because, like I said, you already have way too many globals to fit in as it is. I got a little bit more haste from critical strikes of your single target holy power abilities. I think that with the crit mods in the base talent tree, you'll at least activate this enough. And like I said, haste from Crusade and haste from Rush of Light seems like enough to speed up all of the impactful globals that you have and go full into Mastery Verse. A little spoiler on my gearing decisions there, right? To do as much damage as possible while still smoothing out your rotation. Okay, blah. We reinforce that thoroughly. I think this is a choice that I don't see a lot of people making. There used to be, I think, no reason to drop Blade of Vengeance because it was just making your global AoE, which is really nice. But they added something, right? Holy Flames. You deal 3% increased holy damage to targets burning from your Expurgation. So this is a very, very good just 3% damage buff effectively all the time because Blade of Justice is just part of your rotation. So you can Divine Storm to spread it if you want to do more damage AoE, and you can effectively do 3% more damage single target all the time. So yeah, I think Holy Flames is just a tiny bit better there, and that's why I run it. Okay, so now you have AoE Judgment and AoE auto attacks from your Crusader Strike, pretty cool. And then you go down the to the capstones. And my capstone choices are pretty interesting. I think almost everybody in the game runs Divine Arbiter, but with some of the synergies from Herald of the Sun, the fact that Divine Arbiter is nerfed in PvP, this is true. Nobody's going to tell you that. You go to Just Far, I think you should still be able to see it. Assuming that I'm right and they didn't revert the nerf for no reason, this has been nerfed in PvP. So I instead went down this Radiant damage line, which has a chance to call a huge explosion of Radiant damage, though this might also be nerfed in PvP, but you get extra Radiant damage on some abilities you won't be pressing too much. I mean, the Divine Storm is for BGs. A lot of my viewers are going to be doing BGs, so you spread that expurgation. You have a ton of dots, a ton of AoE damage, and a ton of AoE rot, which is crazy for a Ret Paladin, but this whole build is around constant procs of damage and dots damage. And then you have dealing damage over time effects do more damage, so you can see why that's good, because you also grab the Wake of Ashes, extends its dot duration when it crits, but also makes everything else do more damage if it is a dot, 30% more damage during this duration. So dot, and Radiant, and all of this pad damage, and you'll see it on the dummies. This is a fantastic BG build. Remember, I'm going to be making these guides for everybody. BG Blitz is going to be so popular. It's going to be so popular. It is. It really just is. And as a result, I can't ignore it. I can't have some ego arena supremacy nonsense when everybody is looking to play what they want to play, right? So this is a very, very solid BG setup. Now, of course, you can just drop things like this so easily. Rather that one. And I will talk about that in the other build. I will talk about that, so you don't have to worry, you don't have to fret. But if you are looking to play a really cleave-heavy comp, just do as much pad damage as possible, or play Battlegrounds. This rot, this insane AoE burst that you're going to have is going to be integral. And I'll go over the rotation as well, so you'll see it on the dummies. It bursts very hard. Okay, so anyway, right. You still have your Blades of Light, which is absolutely required because it makes you do Holy Strike more damage, so you benefit from all physical and holy mods. But you ignore whichever damage reduction they have, like it's still going to ignore armor. Very cool. And that Holy Strike also gives them 5% more damage. So it's just 5% more damage to all of these abilities and gives them the damage type mod, which is fantastic. Final Reckoning is a huge burst of damage that makes all of your single target holy power abilities do more damage, which is Final Verdict, which you'll be pressing all the time. And then 15% from the other. This is also nerfed in PvP, by the way, but there's no way we're choosing anything else down here. This is still a very fantastic capstone. I guess you could Execution Sentence, but it's single target, and is also nerfed in PvP. Ret has a lot of, after the Ret rework, they were kind of broken, so I think they got a PvP and mod nerf on almost every ability in the game. But don't worry, they're still really good. In fact, they had those PvP and mod nerfs at the end of Dragonflight, and they were still insanely good, so you don't have to worry too much. Anyway, I go Final Reckoning. They're both nerfed in PvP. Final Reckoning and then Final Reckoning increased by 4 seconds, and there you go. That gives you a huge burst window that comes with a huge chunk of damage from Final Reckoning, and then all of those holy power spending abilities will just hit harder and harder and harder. This is even the cleave ones, though not as much as the single target ones, but you'll be pressing Final Verdict way more than anything else. Like I said, Wake of Ashes dot, and then all of the dot damage and the explosion of Radiant damage, Holy and Fire, very cool combination. Fun. Okay, so what does this Herald of the Sun bring for you that makes all this relevant? Well, first of all, it deals Radiant damage. And if it's dealing Radiant damage, then you're getting a buff to Radiant damage from Burning Crusade. So there's just 5% more damage to your Dawnlight. That's awesome. It comes from casting Wake of Ashes, and Wake of Ashes is a core integral part of your burst and also makes all of your dots do more damage, and they're doing Radiant damage. So you can see this engine starting to tick, right? It also does damage over time, so it's buffed by this whole Radiant line. This is so much synergy. I love it. I love talking about things with intrinsic synergy. It's so great. Wake of Ashes. You press Final Verdict twice, you apply Dawnlight. It does damage. It's modified by everything in the tree that I just gave you. It's plug and play. You just press it and it works. Fantastic. Okay. So then we have a replacement, the Word of Glory. So when you press Word of Glory, it's Eternal Flame instead. It is just more healing with a hot effect, right? And it's buffed on yourself. Fantastic. Okay, you've just got some passive mods. You've got more radiant damage, which is from critical strikes, but you do have some critical strikes in the Ret talent tree we'll get to in the end. We have some crit mods, so that's not too inaccessible. You won't gear for crit. You have some mobility changes. You have some Dawnlight damage buffs. I mean, this is all really just passive into that Dawnlight starter talent, which is also just passive. So you don't really have to think about anything. You're just going to do your rotation and you're going to see Dawnlight very, very high, if not the very top damage in your meter. And I'll show you again at the end, I promise. Then you get more haste from applying Dawnlight, which you want to do all the time. And haste is fantastic because now you have 3 different sources of haste, so you just don't really need any of it in your gear. You'll still have max haste. Your globals will feel so good. You'll ramp up that crusade as fast as possible. Awesome. All of this is just passive mods. Divine Purpose just gives you a free Final Verdict, and it does a little bit more damage when you press Wake of Ashes, which is great because you want to press that and then you want to immediately start doing your burst, and Divine Purpose makes that possible. And then finally you have Sun's Avatar, which links everybody with these light beams during Avenging Wrath, which is Crusade for us. And then you're just getting Dawnlight pressure and linked damage effectively everywhere. And if anybody walks through these beams, they take damage. That does matter in cleave situations, and it really matters in BGs because they're not going to really be avoidable. So you'll just have this passive damage from Sun's Avatar the whole time. Okay. So really, Herald of the Sun doesn't... I didn't even really talk about it that much because it doesn't change anything. It is just passive mods to your most important burst rotation. And as a result, when we do the rotation, you will just see it does insane damage, even though I'm just doing the standard ret rotation. It is all passive. It's buffed entirely by this right line that gives you dots, 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 radiant damage, radiant damage, radiant damage. And it's really, really high pressure, and I love it. And it's really flavorful and fun, and it does not require any difficult, complex rotation learning from you. Okay. All right, so now we're moving on to Indignation, and this will be a much quicker section because I just explained all of Ret effectively with the first one. So now we're just going to see the key differences with the Templar Indignation build. So like I said, you don't need the Radiant stuff. This was all for my Sun build, and that way you can grab Divine Arbiter, which I did talk about. It is nerfed in PvP, but it's still a huge source of proc damage, Holy Strike damage. It's there. Right? But then you can go into some more passive sources of damage because you can grab these single target mods and they really add up in a big way. Trust me. Heart of the Crusader, 20% more damage to your Crusader Strike, which, like I said, is just passive from Crusading Strikes, which is then very buffed by Zealot's Fervor, which is 40% more attack speed. But now your attack speed is not auto attacks, it's Crusader Strikes. So if you combine these two talents, you have Crusading Strike. It will be effectively a huge source of your damage passively your entire rotation long and generating holy power. It's just awesome, and you'll be generating more because of the 40% attack speed. So those are the changes. You get away from some of the AoE rot from the dots and the radiant burning, and you go into this upfront chunky holy strike, all passive, all generating very quickly because of the auto attack buff. And then of course you go into Templar. So let's talk about Templar. Well, you have this main ability, Light's Guidance, where, and I have to explain this one, unlike the last tree, because it's a little bit more juicy, a little more interesting. You press Wake of Ashes, and it generates a ton of holy power. And then it turns your Wake of Ashes into Hammer of Light, which is also a huge AoE ability that scales with the Imperium Hammer's passive, which is effectively kind of the underlying feature of Templar, where it's just proccing these hammers that do damage and can AoE if they crit. And there's the next 3 talents are all like modifying this. So Hammer of Light gives you a bunch of damage and then also procs a bunch of damage. Very cool. But they have this intrinsic combination effectively where you're always going to Wake of Ash and then Hammer of Light because they're both bursty and one generates the other. When you press Wake of Ashes, it turns into Hammer of Light, but also pressing Wake of Ashes generates holy power. And then you need to spend all the holy power because this one costs 5 holy power. So you need to immediately spend all that holy power so you don't get overcapped. So you would spend all the holy power generated by Wake. You press like 1 Judgment, you have your 2 holy power, and then you Wake of Ashes into Hammer of Light. Boom, boom, 2 chunky hits, proc a whole bunch of damage. It's fantastic. Like I said, you have Zealous Vindication, which summons more hammers, and you just love free damage. And then you have the summoning more hammers, like I promised, Shake the Heavens. And then this is the AoE if you're Empyrean Hammers crit, it AoEs. So just even more passive pad damage. And then Higher Calling extends this buff right here for more hammers. Everything is just hammers. You get some shields because it's Templar, right? So you've got either Ret Prot or Ret Holy, and then you have these ways of getting survivability, which is nice. And mobility from Divine Steed lasts 2 seconds longer, increases your movement speed by a lot. This is actually fantastic. I mean, you're so fast. Look at you go. Holy cow, dude. You're speed demon. Then you have more buffs for Empyrean Hammer, which is great because you're pressing Judgment effectively all the time. So now that just procs even more damage. There's even more hammers. And then 12% haste. I mean, this is just ridiculous. During your Wake of Ashes burst, that's when you're going to want the most haste. And you get it just from pressing Wake of Ashes into Hammer of Light and then 12% haste, which juices up your Crusade window, which of course you're still running even on this build. And then finally, every time you call one of these hammers, and you've seen how many ways there is to call hammers, you can consume these stacks. You're getting stacks from calling hammers, Light's Deliverance, that's what it is. And then you consume them to cast Hammer of Light again. And then Hammer of Light sets the whole engine in motion again because Hammer of Light calls hammers. And the hammers proc Light's Deliverance, and the Light's Deliverance gives you another Hammer of Light, which calls more hammers. Blah, 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 right? There's the engine. There you go. So you see the engine for both of them. One of them is Radiant and Pad, and the other one is Hammer and Hammer and Hammer. And you have a ton of proc damage, and you have a ton of burst damage. And yeah, it's fun. Is it completely overpowered? No, I don't think so. I think red is in a really good spot right now. There are some things that are a little broken. Frost mages you'll struggle into. But things are going to change. And when the dust settles, I think you have a very, very good core functionality of this spec. There's intrinsic synergies. There's good smooth rotations. Everything feels good to press. And that's the stuff that I really care about. So yeah, I have high hopes for red, this expansion. Because it's been good for a good amount of time right now. Shadowlands and Dragonflight were very good to Ret Paladin. So I wouldn't worry. Okay. All right, so now we're moving on to the base ret tree, and there is a lot of utility in here. So we've got freedom, and then unbound freedom, which allows you to use freedom on somebody else, and then you both get freedom, and you get a little sprint on top of that. So that's very good. Then you have steed, which we were talking about in the mobility section of Templar, but you have steed, double steed, long steed. Here's the triangle of steed. This gives you a lot of mobility, which ret desperately needs. Wings, you're not going to get rid of that. You have your way of getting your Hodge back up faster, and blind, which is a fantastic CC. You can Hodge blind, and they're off DR from each other. Here's the crit that I was talking about. You can get either 1 or 2 stacks of this if you want 2, because you really want all those crit mods. You would have to drop something probably utility heavy. So you'd have to drop like short sack, which I don't think I would recommend. You could drop just the judgment damage for a little crit if you want all those crit mods. It's tough to reach, but you could do it right now. I have 1 out of 2 for a little bit of armor and crit chance. It's not terrible, but not fantastic. Of course, you get your kick. Of course, we just talked about the judgment damage. Then you have bop for physical immunities, which can be used against all the Fury Warriors that are going to be running havoc this expansion. So get ready for that. Then you have this one. This is a huge damage reduction buff. You need this. You need this because it is a ton of passive survivability. Then you have sack and short sack. This gets you out of CC if you sack a teammate and they take damage, and then you get polyed. It's going to break it. It also is just a fantastic wall. More utility for your teammates, right? Sack, blessing of sack to take their damage. 30% of it goes to you. That means 30% of it is not going to them. So if you're full health and they're not, it's pretty much a 30% wall. Wow. And then also, again, it breaks CC, and it's on a very short cooldown with Sacrifices of the Just, modifying it down to 1 minute. Finally, then, well, not finally, because there's still more utility to come, but you have Healing Hands, which gives you the big Word of Glory healing based on how low they are. So your wogs are not that huge, but when you have Eternal Flame and the Sungazer talent tree, you can end up still doing a good amount of healing, and sometimes it's really all you can do to try and keep the game going for the next win condition. Then here's, it's not really utility, but it's survivability. You have a cooldown reduction on all your walls. So great. Then you have a bunch of damage mods down at the bottom. You have haste, which is extremely valuable, and judgment cooldown. You have mastery and strength. I don't think I would need to talk about why that's good. Then you just have, you can get all 3 capstones. Hammer of Wrath, doing more damage, proc damage, auto attacks. We talked about auto attack mod there. and then you can get a little bit of extra damage here. Divine Toll, which is a huge burst button that generates a ton of holy power and fires off judgments, and then this is nerfed in PvP, but who cares? It is just passive damage and healing from this entire... You don't even have to look at this. It's literally just passive damage and healing. You won't even notice it. It'll just be there the whole time. Whew. Okay. We did it. That was a lot of words, huh? Sorry. Then we have PvP talents. Unfortunately, this is going to be a lot of words too because Red has a ton of utilities, so it has a ton of utility-based PvP talents. Spell warding. I feel like I should talk about this for a million years because of my difficulties in solo shuffle. Getting this ability to be pressed. What this does is it gives you a, Blessing of Protection, the physical bop that would be really good against Arms Warriors and Fury Warriors and Windwalker Monks, right? You have an exact version of that for the wizards, for mages and locks, but it's not just mages and locks, it's anybody who does magical damage. It doesn't matter if they're swinging a sword. You know what DK does? Magic damage. Magic, it's frost damage. They're swinging a sword, but it's magic damage, right? If you frost strike, if you death coil, spell warding, it is immune. It is fully immune. So when somebody has magic damage or is a wizard, a lock, a mage, a shadow priest, any of these things, right? Please use spell warding. Please use spell warding. Even mages can spell steal the bop. So if it's like a warrior and a mage on the same team, the mages can just take your bop, your blessing of protection. They can just spell steal it away. So you're not preventing anything and you're giving them a bop. But if you spell warding, you're now preventing all the mage's damage. The warrior can still hit you, but before it's going to be both could still hit you because the mage would just take it, right? So spell warding. Let's use this. Let's use this button a lot. Let's talent into this when you see mages and locks and shadow priests and death knights, frost or unholy, and anything that does magic. Honestly, Ret Mage. Use it into Ret Mage because they're both magical damage, right? Okay. I got that on my chest. Yeah, use spell warding a lot when you see those classes. Okay, Searing Glare is a very cool button because, generally people are not looking to kick Ret, and if they do kick the Ret, then the healer can free cast, and if the healer's been getting kicked, then you can Searing Glare. It's just a huge button on a 45-second cooldown, not very long, that can just immune a go effectively because it just makes them miss everything, right? It can be dispelled, but if you do it AoE, you can't dispel everybody, and also sometimes the healer is panicking, so he's not able to get a dispel off in that window, and you just make them miss something very important, like either a huge burst button or a kidney shot or something else like that. So Searing Glare has value. I've actually seen people use Spreading the Word as well. If they just have a ton of physical damage, you get the bop, and then you get the physical wall to everybody in your aura, which is just really good at handling cleave. And you know what cleaves really hard right now? It's Fury Warrior. Yeah, it's Fury Warrior. Fury Warrior does a lot of cleave. So you can handle that a little bit better with Spreading the Word. And then you have a bunch of nerf stuff. Like they used to have 3 damaging PvP talents, Lawbringer, Luminescence, these things. And yeah, those were all too obscene when you put them all in the same spec and you just had all of these different damage mods. Then they just did too much damage, so they had to tune those back. So now people don't really run them as much, but you still run Aura of Reckoning that gives you wings. And the wings activates the Crusade version of wings, so you can actually ramp up some haste during that window. It lasts for 9 seconds and gives you a huge weapon swing when you get to this 100 stacks of Reckoning that procs wings. And you know what that's buffed by? All your auto attack mods. So you actually just randomly auto attack somebody for a huge chunk of damage and then immediately go into wings. Passive damage, passive wings. This thing is great. So Aura of Reckoning. We've talked about Spell Warding is the other one I have locked in right now. We talked about Spreading of Word. We understand why Luminescence and Lawbringer are not quite what they once were. We see Searing Glare have some utility if you really need to stop goes. And then finally, Sank. Blessing of Sank. I think this is an auto pick into almost everything in the game, if not literally everything in the game. It is a fantastic way to get your healer out of CC. That is Stun, Silence, Fear, and Horror. That is Asphyxiate from a DK, Strang from a DK, Stun from literally every class in the game effectively, Fear from almost every class. I mean, look, Locks have Fear, Warriors have Fear, Priests have Fear. DHs have Fear nowadays. Everybody has a Stun. We've got Hodge, we've got Asphyxiate, we've got even... Frost Mage has that like proc AoE stun. Locks have double axe toss. Locks have Shadow Fury. Mistweavers have sweep. Windwalkers have sweep. You have Bash from Druids. You have Maim from Druids. You have Rogue, Kidney Shot. I mean, God, the king stun of them all, right? So when you talent into this, just look. 45-second cooldown. You can press it all the time. Look for your healer to be in something. If they're in a stun, use it. It also prevents the future applications of the next CC for 5 seconds. it reduces those effects by 60%. So if you press it on a kidney and then he tries to follow it up with something, right? They follow it up with maybe his kidney is going to be, and the priest is running at you for fear or chastise fear, and then right you get him out of the chastise, but he doesn't move and he still gets fear. The fear is now like 2 seconds long. So the fear didn't even really matter in the first place, right? You just got him out of 1 CC and made the other one insanely short, so it turned 8 seconds of CC into 2. Right? 2.5. No, it's really 2 actually. 5, 60%, 2. Yeah, okay. So sync is crazy. So sync, Aura of Reckoning, and then maybe a variable third, spell warding if you're going to need it for all those wizards out there, especially mages, and then you have these other niche choices. Spreading the word, Searing Glare, I've seen them run, so there you go. That was tough. A lot of words. Gear. These are going to be very short words, and I've actually already talked about it, the entirety of the talent builds. But the idea is that you're getting haste from your tree. You are getting the haste gear from your tree. Your talents give you haste. So go all into Mastery Verse. And when we craft gear, you're going to craft Mastery Verse gear. That's what you're going to do. You're going to try and get as much mastery and as much verse as humanly possible and get the haste from the talent, and then you have everything. I don't even really need to show you. Obviously, you can't have 2 mastery rings right now, but you can when the season comes out. So you'll recraft this haste one into a mastery one. You've got verse mastery, you've got verse mastery, you've got verse mastery, right? As much verse mastery as I could possibly throw in here, just grab those pieces. And then if you have to choose between crit and haste, I still think I would choose haste because crit is nerfed by 50%, and that's a big number. But when the season comes out, you're going to slowly replace all the haste gear with crafted gear with mastery and verse on it. And then you have like a trillion mastery, a trillion verse, and all your haste from talents, and you're good. That section was 1 minute. I'm so happy about that. That took no time at all, because now we can talk about the rotation. And I promised I wanted to show you guys the rotation, specifically in the Herald of the Sun. But I didn't want to do that. That's not what I wanted to do. I was thinking about Herald of the Sun, and I clicked that. This is what I wanted to do. Sungazer build. So, okay. You need to get Judgment buff on people. You need to get Expurgation on people. You're just going to put these as part of your rotation. When you run up to something, you can get your Divine Toll out. You can Final Reckoning and then Wings, and then spend Holy Power, generate it with Wake, and then spend it again. And you just keep spending and generating with Judgment and Blade of Justice. Spending with Final Verdict, Judgment, Blade of Justice. Spend with Final Verdict, Judgment, Blade of Justice. Over and over and over while you're generating tons and tons of haste from Crusade. Again, you're going to get in there. You're going to set up these 2 buttons. Then you're going to throw out the Divine Toll, Final Rec, Wings Burst, spend Holy Power, generate, spend, generate, spend, generate, spend, generate, spend. Here we go. Running in there. As you run to it, your little steed there, right? AoE. Final Reckoning. With Wings, Final Reckoning. Big spend. Big spend when you get a Divine. Look at that. Spend. Look at your haste. Oh my god, my globals are so fast. So 1.7 million DPS, and it's going to stay for a pretty long time here, and that is not bad, because this is very hard to peel damage. It's all ranged. It's all ignoring armor because it's magical damage, holy strike damage. I mean, it's pretty good. You finally run out of some holy power generation toward the end of this whole thing, but you're just alternating. Judge, Blade, alternating. Hey, Wake comes back up, and you get a whole bunch more radiant damage. And as promised, Dawn Light, the dot. Then you've got Sun's Avatar. Then you got Wake of Ashes. And you got autos and rot and dot damage and consecration, which comes out from your Blade of Justice. You don't have consecration anymore; it's passive from a talent. Okay, and now we're just going to show you indignation real quick, but I'm not actually going to show you the burst again. I just want to show you one interaction, literally just one, because it's the exact same burst. Look, my buttons are all exactly the same. There's just one cool thing that happens. Judge, let's get that. All right, so you would spend that Holy Power, then you would generate it with Wake, it turns into Hammer of Light, and then you press it again. You see that? That was so cool. God, the flavor in this expansion is so fun. Oh my god, the visuals, the aesthetics, it's awesome. Okay, so that's what it looked like. Wake of Ashes, generate to 5, turns into it, press the same button again, throws down the hammer, locked and loaded. Ret Paladin. That's Ret Paladin. There it is. Did this help? That's a hard video to make. There's a lot to talk about in this one. Everything has the same name, and it's all glowy, and it hurts my eyes sometimes. Okay, Ret Paladin looks super fun for the expansion. I hope this helped in any way. If there's anything you want to add, comments, suggestions, anything, please tell me in the comments. I swear I've been so responsive to these. I promise. So thank you for being here. You're kind and amazing. I appreciate you. Peace.